Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of Trades Talk. I'm your co-host Justin White, and I'm excited to invite you into 2025. What an amazing year 24 was. So much accomplished, so much momentum for our industry and the trades industry. A big highlight was December 12th, ServiceTitan went public, officially the day of the trades. It's an amazing time to be a trade professional today. And I'm excited to announce a new opportunity. Think of this as a two-way podcast. I launched this group called the Disruptors. The Disruptors is an online community focused around trades professionals who want to build their business to at least 8 figures in revenue. We've brought on expert speakers, some who have been on the podcast. We have developed courses to help you learn and build your business. And we have a community of like-minded people who are sharing insights, information, and issues about growing their business. If you are interested in surrounding yourself with a mastermind of people who are innovative, radical self-believers, and taking massive action in building their business, then you owe it to yourself to check out the Disruptors. Go to my website, www.jwhitegroup.com, to learn more about the Disruptors and see how you can join. Without further ado, let's jump into today's episode. Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Trades Talk. Today we got a special guest in the house today, John Pajak, who also runs Profits with Paycheck. John, how you doing today? Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm doing fantastic, Justin. It's good to see you and talk to you again.
Well, guys, John is a seasoned professional entrepreneur and the driving force behind Profits with Paycheck. If you guys have not listened to that podcast, start off with the episode that he just released, which was him and I talking all about electric equipment and how you can make more money going battery. And before we get too deep into this, I want to introduce my co-host, Maggie Wymore, which all of you know. Maggie, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm excited to dive in with John. I know he's got a lot to say, not only on the electric equipment front, which we've already spent, 15 minutes off air talking about, but just what he has upcoming in the next year and how he's going to help his customers grow and put more money in people's pockets. So excited to have you here, John.
Well, thanks, Maggie. It's really great to meet you and looking forward to this conversation.
So, John, you started out as a lawn care professional. Walk us through that a little bit. What's your background in the industry? And then maybe take us into today where you're at with a podcast professional, certified coach, all this other stuff you're doing.
So way back in the day, like I started out just like pretty much everybody, working for another company. I cut my teeth on it, started to learn how to do things, worked my way up through that company, became the right-hand man, would run crews. And then, of course, I got that itch where I said, you know what, I had a lot of bills coming in that I wasn't able to pay. So I said, I need more money. So I think I could do this myself. I think I could make more money if I go out and do the same thing I'm doing right now and just do it for myself. So I was naive, I went out there. I was a fantastic technician. I did a really good work. But then I tried to start my little business, Johnny Boy Lawn Care, on the side, and quickly realized I knew nothing about business. And that failed within the first year. Now, I was still working for the company I was, working for. But I realized I didn't know how to manage things properly, and I didn't know how to make money the right way. It's like I was still in this employee mindset of, well, if he's charging $20 for a lawn, then I could go out there and charge $20 too, and everything will be great.
I'm going to pause you right there. Ask you a quick question. What was your indication that you didn't know how to run the company? Like, what was your first aha moment that, okay, I got to figure this out better?
So it was easy. It was, I started realizing I was spending more money than I was making. And my situation didn't change. So I was working even more. I was putting even more hours because I still was working, between 45, 50 hours with that job. And then in the additional time that I had, like on weekends or later in the evening, if I had time, I was doing my side hustle, and I started realizing, I'm like, bills are actually getting tighter for me. Like it's not easier to pay my rent. It's not easier to pay the medical bills. It's not easier to go and grab a bite to eat. I'm like counting pennies and, like really making things stretch. It's bad when you got to like make ramen stretch. Mix some like barbecue sauce in there just to give it some extra flavor because you had to put extra water in there.
Drop an egg in there just to make it
Drop an egg. I couldn't afford the damn eggs.
Yeah. I remember this one time I had to go to the ATM and I had less than $20 in my account. And so I had to go to a different ATM that allows you to get $5 bills out. And I was drawing out my last like $10 and $5 bills. I was like, something's got to change. I got to get on a different path here.
And and I'll come to this revelation here. I realized too, I was doing the same thing. I was like kind of like living out of an ATM just because of the convenience of it. And I'm like, all $20 at a time. And I'm like, the processing fees, it was like, it's cost you $2 to take $20 out. And I'm like, I'm just killing myself this way. It's like, I'm not only struggling to make ends meet, but then I'm also hamstringing myself by, taking money out of an ATM. So we're talking like 25 years ago when this was happening. But yeah, the biggest indicator was I was working myself to the bone. And then I realized I was not making any progress. As a matter of fact, it was making my condition worse. So after that failed, I was lucky enough to sell the equipment that I had, and the accounts that I had were, I was able to like give them to somebody for like a quick buck, and that kind of got me square. I ended up working with that company for a little while longer. I ended up going back to school. I became a teacher or a college instructor for a little while. Got burnt out with that job. Ended up going into construction, and I was originally like a laborer, but they kind of saw something in me because over the past few years, I had really started to work on, budgeting, getting out of debt, making sure I understood numbers better, because there was always this seething thing in the back of my mind that like, you failed at this so bad. And I'm like, I want to do it again. But this time I'm going to come back stronger. Right. So when I was in construction, I think God put me on the path. I started doing things like I was a timekeeper for the company. I was one of the other companies I worked for. They started me on estimates, and these are like multi-million-dollar projects that we're working on. So I picked up from other people how to estimate properly. And then after a while, I got really good at it. And my estimates were better than I was winning that company more jobs based on my estimates, not because they were the lowest, but because they were the most thorough and most thought out. That's one of those things. Like when you fail so bad, sometimes you have to, it's like you come back, you're like, I got to train harder. I got to make sure I fix everything. Well, everything was going well. I was making really great money doing that. I had great benefits and everything. I wasn't always doing estimating, go back into the field. But when I was in the field, a couple times I almost got killed because we worked in really dangerous areas. We worked in steel mills and the oil refinery and stuff. And it could be extremely dangerous, the stuff we're doing, because we're not just like walking around. We're like in these vessels that need repair. And anyway, long story short, I go, you know what? I never got killed mowing lawns or spraying lawns or anything. So let's go back. My daughter was very young at the time too. She was maybe 2 years old. And I was like, you know what? This is it. I talked to my wife. I said, listen, I'm going to take a little bit of a step back here. I think I should start this business again because it's been eating at me for like the past, at that time, like 8 years, 10 years, something like that. Actually, like 12. Well, I was like 12 years almost. Anyway, I got back in. I ended up leaving that job. I broke my fingers the first week. I was supposed to like ease into the lawn care company again, but I ended up breaking my fingers in an accident. A car rear-ended me, and I slammed my hand into the A-pillar. and it broke my fingers, and I couldn't work construction. So they're like, yeah, you're going to have to go on unemployment or whatever. And I'm like, well, I guess this is my sign to start the lawn care company full time.
You're doing this kind of like dangerous job, working in the field, doing all kinds of different things for this construction company. You decide to get back into the industry. And what was the mindset going into that? Like you failed. I think failure is where we learn the most, but were you, compared to the first time, were you like overly cautious, and were you hyper focused on financials? Like obviously your podcast is called Profits with Paycheck. So like, what was the mindset going into the business the second time around?
And it was exactly that. I'm like, okay, we're going to change a lot of things. Everything from, how we accept payment, the terms that we do. Not only that, like I had to understand how I was going to make my numbers right for my services. So before it ever had a name, I offer like a workshop now. It's called Budgets, Break-Evens, and Bottom Lines. But before that was ever like, a name, I would go through and I would make sure like I covered every little aspect of like what it took to do those services. And we're talking, you're looking at your labor costs, your fixed overhead, any variables that come with those jobs, your equipment replacement, equipment operational costs, productivity times, marketing. All these things were like just this big old stew. And I would like get down to the point where it's like, okay, we're going to break this down so we know exactly how much everything costs us per hour. And then I started really talking about goals. Like, okay, if I want to do this, how much money do I have to make to do that? How much profit do I have to make? So instead of going, well, everybody's charging $50, I'll just charge $50 too. It's like, no, I want to make X amount of dollars, or I want to get into a shop. I need this much capital. How do I get into that? So that's how I based all my pricing. So anyway, I started the business again, and it was working well for me. I was moving a little bit slower, but then I started realizing I kind of got into a lot of the Facebook groups, and I was reaching out and helping out other business owners. A lot of the YouTube guys, especially the OGs of YouTube, there were a lot of them. I'd watch their videos and I'm like, man, something, let me reach out to them and I DM them and everything. And the next thing you know, they're sharing their numbers with me. And I'm like, yeah, whoa, you're just throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks.
You really went in with a mathematical perspective of like starting from the end and then almost reverse engineering to get to what your price should be, rather than just like probably a lot of contractors. Well, they charge $50 an hour, so I'll charge $50 an hour. So you really figured that out. Was there a big delta in what you felt like you should be charging versus what the market rate in your area was at the time?
Anybody that works with me, I'm like, besides getting your numbers straight for your services, I mean, the numbers don't lie. It's like if it costs you $10,000 to operate your business per week, that's the number. We could find ways to streamline that if needed. But the thing is, it's like, where do you want to go? Where are you destined to? Because that's going to have an impact on what your pricing structure should be. And I started to realize, and I also want them to, work a couple steps ahead. So, and the reason I say that is because, like, if you got like, we'll just call him Chuck's in the truck or Dan in the van, it's a single guy operation. He is working out of his garage in his house. Well, he doesn't have the expenses that another company has and it's not even a big company. It's just somebody that has maybe 2 or 3 trucks that's rolling and they have a shop space. Okay. When you're trying to put apples to apples, it's like, well, you're not in the same category. Yeah, you're Dan in the van and you're charging the absolute rock bottom, and you're trying to figure out why you're so busy, but you're really not making any headway. It's because everybody's hiring you because you're the cheapest. And you're going to, as you start growing, it's like, okay, I need more work. I need to, expand. Your pricing is not where it's supposed to be. You're not going to be able to adjust until you go, I need to hire some people and I need to have a shop now. If you try to keep those prices where they're at, it just doesn't work.
My question for you is, how many times do you run into John of 25 years ago? People that are your clients that you're just onboarding or whatnot, and they're doing the same things wrong that you did 25 years ago.
First of all, I've got an open heart, because I'm empathetic. I try not to be sympathetic about it. I try to be empathetic. I know where they're at. I know what they're feeling. It's like, of course, everybody has their own little nuances that I might not be picking up on. But at the same time, it's like, I've been there and I understand where you're at. I also understand there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
I wanted to ask a question for you real quick and take kind of like a side detour and then come back to this point in the story, which is when these entrepreneurs, the one-man show, owner-operator goes, they lease a shop, they start having more overhead. It's probably the hardest point in business, right? Because you now have the least amount of volume in that shop, and yet you have the most expenses. The guy down the street, he maybe is having 6 to 12 vans roll out of his shop with the same overhead. So you kind of go from, I think, this like owner operator, very low overhead to, as a percentage of your revenue, a very high percentage of overhead. And then it starts to get better and better. But this is where these valleys of death occur in businesses. So through your process, your workshops, your masterminds, do you see that being the hardest part for entrepreneurs, is that point where they go from owner operator in the back of the house to their first shop?
To go back where I was talking with about Maggie, the question she had asked, that light at the end of the tunnel, when everybody's in those low parts of the valley and they're trying to figure out why I don't understand. I'm working so hard. A lot of times, there's two main contributors that I feel that are the reason why they get there. One, they're not charging the appropriate price. And two, their efficiencies are not there. So a lot of times it doesn't seem like it, especially if you're like down, if you're hurting. It's actually easier to have a bigger company than it is to have a small one. And the reason I say that is because when you have multiple employees working for you, working with you, working in your company to help build it, the weight is off of, if you're just trying to pick one, like say huge sack of like grain up, right? You could do it, but it's like it's really uncomfortable. It's all over the place. It's hard to handle. It's just moving with you. Okay, this is why I use that analogy. It's not just like a big box. Okay, it's spilling out all over the place. It's still in the sack, but it's hard to handle and it's heavy. But you get like 3-4 people underneath there. It gets it's easier to control. It's like, okay, well, yeah, it's still kind of slipping through your hands a little bit. It wants to move, but at the same time, like, we got a handle on it. And the weight is distributed among other people. And before you know it, if you get a whole gaggle of people under there, it's like, oh, this is easy. It's like everything's contained. Everybody has their own spot. They're holding up their part that wants to wiggle around on you. And the load is a lot lighter. But the thing is, it's if you look at it you stand back, you see one guy struggling with that big sack of grain, right? That's all over the place. And then you can put it in comparison to there's 10 guys holding that same bag, and they could go wherever they want with it. So to break that back to the shop, if you're a one-man show, or if you're maybe you just have, what a lot of guys say, a helper, right? They might not be full-time employees or whatever, but like if you have more shoulders to help distribute that load, it actually becomes easier. It's like, yeah, you're going to have like your labor rates are going to be higher. Your fixed expenses might go up a little bit. Like you have that additional shop space or whatever it might be, but once it's distributed amongst other people and they're working for you, they're bringing money into your company, it makes it so much easier. So and then to really double back to what I was talking about before, trying to be 2 steps ahead, this is why goals are so important to me. I understand that if you don't know where you're going, if you don't understand where you're at and then where you want to go, you're going to be listless for a long time. You're just going to be kind of like treading water and not exactly knowing which way to swim. So if you're just a one-man show, why don't you already, and you want to get into a shop, why don't you start charging like for that, accommodating for it? Yeah, your prices are going to be a little bit higher, but when you get to that point, it's not going to be culture shock to your existing client base that, wow, prices went up like dramatically because of it.
On that price increase note, I'd love to talk about that for a minute, is just strategy. Let's say there's someone listening and they've done the work, they figured out, I need to increase pricing. I mean, this is going to be coming out right at the beginning of the year. We need to increase pricing. What do we do? And it was funny, I was talking to a property manager earlier this week, and they had gotten the first price increase in 4 years from one of our competitors. And it was $30 a month. And it was enough for the HOA to go, I think we should go out to bid. And when I go, are they doing a good job? She's like, yeah, they're actually, it looks pretty good. I was like, do not go out to bid, because you're just going to show how underpriced your property is, and you're not going to find anyone to do it cheaper. I mean, if their $30 increase over 4 years is crazy. So I say that to say, don't let yourself go 2 years or even a year without increasing your pricing. You miss out on those opportunities for compounded increase. But John, let's just say someone has been doing really, really well. They now have a shop. They now have all this overhead in 2024. They're going into 25 realizing, man, I've tripled the size of my company. I'm making way less money. What would you tell to that person? How do they get their prices up? What's the approach? Any advice there?
Yeah, that's a little bit of a loaded one.
That was super loaded, actually.
There's a lot of different nuances that are in there. It might not just be raise your pricing. It might not, I'm going to throw a couple scenarios out there, and then you could pick the one that you want to follow. So it's like choose your own adventure. How's that sound?
I love it.
So one, it might not be the best way just to go out and raise your prices. You have to understand what it costs you. If you're okay, but your profit margins aren't where you expect them to be, and that's why I'm like Babe Ruth. I tell people all the time, I always try to treat my business as if I'm Babe Ruth at the plate. I don't care what everybody else is charging. I'm going to sit there and go, I want this percentage. I want this margin. I want a 30% margin. That's what I'm gunning for. I'm going to call my shot. The reason is like, I know what it costs me. I know what the market value is of our services in our area. And whether, basically, I mean, the market will tell me if I'm out of my mind or if I'm not. Because if I go out there and I point out to the home run and I go, okay, I'm going to be doing 30% margins right now. And I go out there and I start closing every single deal. I get a red flag and go, wait a second. Why is everybody saying yes? Like, damn, that's not right. Like, and some guys get excited about that. And I'm like, you're leaving money on the table when that happens. It's either like nobody else is doing what you're doing, or if you have competition, you're leaving money on the table. So it's like, well, wait, I should have been shooting higher.
And we can take it one step further. Probably something that you do with your clients too is just understanding, because raising prices across the board is one thing, but then understanding where you need to raise them, where the shortfalls are coming from. It might look different in one job versus another. And being able to see that profit level down to the job and service level is so critical, so you know where to raise them. And like that example you used, Justin, of the HOA, maybe they're doing okay in all their services except one. So that's why the increase was just $30 per month. They're probably going to spend more than $30 of their time going out to bid. So like there's also the cost of work there. But as a provider, one of the things I think people miss out on is like when you do a price increase, like educating, like, hey, we're doing really well on all of these specific services, but it's costing us money literally on a daily basis to do your fertilization or to trim your shrubs or whatever it may be, and explain like where you're coming from that price increase standpoint.
And I agree with you 100% there, because when I look at businesses and I help them out, we don't just look at, ABC Lawn Care or whoever they are, right? I don't go, well, what's your top line revenue? Blah, blah, blah. I'm looking at it, I go, okay, here's your top line revenue. What services are you providing? And I like to break down their service lines as divisions in their business. So their mowing division and their fertilization, those aren't just, it's like, yes, they make up the whole company, but I treat them as, even if you're a one-man show, I'm like, you have divisions in your company. You need to know what is mowing the moneymaker? Because like to Maggie, like what you're saying, if you just go across the board and say, I need to raise 5%, you could be really screwing yourself up. You could like literally be cutting your own Achilles by going, well, no, wait. If we break it down by division, our mowing, you know what? We're right in the pocket. We're actually, maybe we're closing 3 out of, we have like a 30% close rate. So we're closing 3 out of 10 people that come in, which is totally fine with me as long as they're in the same area. We could have it higher if we're really trying to get route density, but I don't want to go down another rabbit hole. I could go
no 30% is like good. That's a good mark.
Yeah,
I agree.
So like, let's just say 30%. We're like perfect. We're in there. We're getting the margins we want. Obviously, I find that with maintenance, it's a lot lower than 30% that we're going to get on return. I think before I disbanded our mowing division, I think we were around 19% profit on that, which I think is still good. It worked for us. But anyway, to get back to what I was talking about with Maggie, let's just say our fertilization, we still have like the 30% close rate, but our margins are a lot lower. They're almost closer to what it is. And it's like, yeah, you know what? We need to raise prices on this because our risk is so much higher with fertilization weed control. We have a lot more material involved in it, and it's very volatile. It's, especially like if you look at like 21, we went from, what was it, $120 a ton for nitrogen, and it went up to like, I stopped tracking it once it hit $1,400 a ton for nitrogen. I was like, we were paying, it was a great challenge. That's a different story for another day, but I'm glad I went through it because it made me problem solve in a way I never did before. But getting back to that, it's like you don't want to do a whatever percentage across the board. Maybe you just pick those services that are the dogs, like this. We're just spending a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money in this one, but it's not giving us the return we want. So that one we might focus on to find out if we need to be more efficient, if we could streamline it within our own business to maybe stay close to the pricing we're at and then still do a price increase, or maybe we need to do a savage overhaul on that one, cut it to the bone, bring it back, and then get the margins we need. Or even sometimes you might need to stop doing that service. That doesn't mean you have to completely stop doing it till the end of time, but maybe you need to take some time off, go back to the drawing board, and come back when you're ready, if you ever do.
I think this conversation is so timely and important right now, just knowing what businesses are going through at this time of year. Not such a big impact on the non-seasonal markets, but the seasonal markets, this is renewal season. And Justin, I would love to hear your team's process of renewals, how you guys go through, identify, but also like just any advice, whether it be contract term language you put into your first year bidding a new site. Is there any sort of verbiage in there to protect you doing a reevaluation after the first year? Also, just like how detailed do you get on your each individual site when it comes to renewals?
I think a lot of it for us over the past, 7 years now, 2017. Yeah. 2017 was the year that I remember really trying to remove a lot of bottlenecks in my company. And the thing that's been working for us is keeping it simplified and cleaning a lot of things up. So instead of sending out annual for maintenance now, these are mowing and fertilization weed control, maybe even gutter cleaning stuff. We didn't do that service line, but just to open it up for people. once somebody signed on and they had their terms of service and they agreed to those, we would basically say, we're going to just count on us being back every year. We instead of having to get, because I mean, think about it. If you have to get your contract signed by everybody before you move on for the year, that's a huge bottleneck. Now, I'm not saying that this is the way you have to do everything, but for recurring maintenance, I found that it's easier just to do it that way. And then as we're going through, it's like there's going to be price increases. We'll notify people ahead of time, but for the most part, we just touch base with our people and say, okay, here's the price for the year, whatever. And they're like, they just expect us to be there every season. So if you could get rid of a lot of bottlenecks in your business, that takes a lot of the stress away when you're in renewal season.
John, real quick, I want to jump in on that because I think this is something we changed that made a huge difference in retention around the end of the year. We used to do that where we'd send a DocuSign out on a new contract. However, I don't know in other states, but I know in California, whether it's a 1-year contract, 3-year contract, 5-year contract, our clients, and we could agree on a 90-day out, a 6-month out. We could agree on whatever we want to agree on. In California, when they're done with us, they don't have to pay us anymore. They can just, we're done. And for the amount it will cost for us to take them to any type of a court system to get paid because they breached the contract, unless it's some crazy $100,000 a month account, there's really no recovering that money. And that's just period how it is. So for us, we've moved completely away from any type of a rigid contract language. We've moved completely away from like this idea of annual renewals. It's just like, hey, we do a good job. You like what we do. You pay us this much. As long as we keep paying and you keep paying and we keep doing it, we're good. We're really good about our AR. So we bill at the beginning of the month and, we get paid usually well before the end of the month. So we're always in somewhat of a cash flow positive position. And at the end of the year, we make a conversation around October to most of our clients over phone calls, just saying, this is what the market's looking like. This is what we're seeing, the consumer price index and these other factors. We're looking at somewhere between a 4 and 6% increase. Our costs have increased by 9%, but we've found efficiencies through our battery operated program where we're actually going to save hopefully 5 to 6% next year. So basically, our costs went up, let's just call it 10%. We're only going to give you a 5% raise because we're splitting that with you. We're going to find 5% in efficiencies. And so in January, your bill's going up by 5%, which is X amount, and let your accounting team know. There's no contract language. And the funniest thing is almost everybody, when we send that January bill, it's an auto pay situation and they just pay the bill. No issues at all. So that was something that we've picked up and that has been really helpful for us. Maggie, what do you think?
Yeah, I have a question for that because one of the things that I pride myself on with working with the Aspire system and just like business in general when it comes to landscapers is this idea of like build revenue versus performed revenue. And this might not be an issue you run into a lot, Justin, but let's say that you've billed them for like 3 months straight, starting in January, where it may be, and you go out there and you do your spring cleanups, like you put in a ton of labor towards it and they owe you a balance. Essentially, you're billing them for a 12-month price, but you are taking on a lot of that cost in the first 3 months. So while your cash flow is good, your margins on an earned basis are a little off. Do you go back or do you have any sort of language to go back and say, hey, like we also track this and that you're going to have to true up your contract to this amount?
We don't run it like that. And I would recommend people don't run it like that. It's nice in a way to spread it out over 12 months and be like, yeah, you just pay, $500 a month instead of $300. And then a few times you pay more. We want to get paid when we do the work. So any kind of spring cleanup, fall cleanup, whatever it is billed in the month that is performed. It keeps our and it keeps our over under intact. And the other thing I'll say is, as long as we don't start it, if we start a client in, let's just say April 1st, we have what I would consider exposure of that client in the first 6 to 12 months because we haven't had a full winter season with him. So in California, this is a little bit easier, but it's fairly similar cost in December that it is in June. There's some spikes in summer and fall and spring, but overall it's pretty similar cost. except the rain days. So the rain days, we get some money back. So as long as I'm bringing on clients in December and January, by the time April 1st hits, I'm already ahead of the game a little bit. Nothing significant, but somewhat. And then we basically try to carry that balance throughout the year. But any type of big spring cleanup, annuals, all that, we've gotten away from spreading it across 12 months for that reason, is we don't want to get in a place where they owe us or we owe them. We just try to keep it even month over month.
I've seen so many people run into that problem too, especially when they tried to spread their snow into a seasonal snow contract over 5-6 months, and they bill the same amount every month. While you know that money's coming in, regardless if it snows or not, it can go really, really bad the opposite direction. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, John, what's your take on all that? I mean, it seems like the trying to make the renewal not a huge thing for the clients is we're both aligned on that. What about spreading out some of the costs throughout the year versus one-time billings? I know there's a big mix in the industry about how people do that.
Yeah, I was told when I started my business again, one of the main things I made sure to do was I was not going to chase money. So when I started the business, we were prepay only. Now you could pay us cash, check, credit card, whatever, but it was billed a cycle ahead. So when we first started, I was billing monthly, but I was prepay. So if we started in April, let's just say April 1st, you got the bill that would cover you through until, May. That worked for a while, but then we started getting into kind of like what Maggie was saying. We had people that were complaining about services paid for versus services rendered. And at the time, the terms of service we had did not really, it was just like, hey, this is because we're doing your cleanup or we're doing additional work during certain times of the year. It's like your price is your price. You can't really negotiate it. And I remember there was a time period where we had a really bad, really super wet spring, and like people were literally like 2 weeks behind on their service dates because we were literally underwater. And then I would get a ton of calls. They're like, hey, listen, we already paid for this. How about you just bump us over like 2 mows or whatever, 2 services into the next month, and then I'll just pay you. You'll just take that off my new bill. And it got kind of messy. It got sticky. People weren't understanding. It's like, look, your electric, right? Let's put it as a fixed rate thing. Let's just say it's your cable. Okay. Your cable, I'm dating myself now because, I still think cable's viable. Instead of streaming services. But, when we used to have a cable bill, right? If you were only home for like 2 days and then you took a month vacation and you weren't home to watch the cable, can you call the cable company up and be like, hey, I only watched for like 3 days. Can you like adjust my bill so that you're only charging me for 3 days of this service? They're like, no, it's the rate. This is the rate you agreed to. This is the rate you're paying. I say all of that just to go, I knew that I saw that was another issue. That was another bottleneck. It was supposed to make my life easy. And then it was becoming more of a headache, and it was something stupid, in my opinion. So I said, you know what? Here's what we're going to do. We're going to get everybody's card on. We transferred basically everybody to card on file. And I said the most fair thing is we're going to have your card on file, and we're going to charge the date of service. So our cash flow, when I started doing that, of course, we had to grandfather some people in, and we had to do some other things. And we still take cash and check and, silver and gold, like however people want to pay us. But if they do any other way than card, they have to still prepay. So if somebody's like, I got to pay cash, I'm like, I'm not going to be waiting around after we do service to like have it slipped underneath the doormat or the check's in the grill. And, oh, my kid started up the grill and the check went up in flames and, the million excuses. Yeah. So it's like, here, if you want to do cash, no problem. We'll do a prepay and we'll even give you a little bit of a discount. That's totally fine. But everybody else, it's like they're just so used to having automated payments anyway. Let's do it that way. So one, it solved a lot of problems. Like our cash flow is amazing. Like literally, like every day we're invoicing out and we're getting paid for that day. Within 2 days, we have the money in our bank account. So it keeps cash flow perfect. It's a 1-for-1. Like, hey, we did the service. and the customer is happy and they paid us. So we're never behind. It's like, we did the service, they paid. We're good. If they decide to leave, then there's no problem. When it comes down to, let's just say, we do have a little bit of a variable, like now with just fertilization and weed control. We try to, I basically designed the program so it's every service, standard service, is like pretty much the same price, except for one of our applications, just because it is a more expensive and it's a lot more stuff in it, like our grub control round. They know that that's a higher price. So they'll see a fluctuation where it's a higher price for like 1 month or one cycle, and then the next one's, as long as they don't add anything a la carte, then it's the price that was in their agreement. Anything a la carte, if they call and say, hey, listen, I got, we see a bunch of stink bugs around our house. Could you do a perimeter pest control? Sure, we could do that. We'll just add it on to the next application. And it's easy. And it's great for like upsells and things too, because we're just charging as we need.
Yeah. And then, so they mentioned that, and then you basically get that invoicing or that billing set up when, or before you guys go to the site, or is there sometimes where you'll do more and then you'll kind of invoice after? What about those one-offs?
A little bit of both. Like, like going into it, if it's an existing client, we'll just, a lot of times we'll just add it to the job, and it'll already have the price. The CRM we use already has the pricing and everything involved into it. So when we generate the invoices, it's like, oh, they had their regular treatment, plus they had, let's just say it's a ornamental bush treatment. They needed to get those sprayed for fungi or for disease prevention and insect or something. And we could just add that on. If we're there and we could actually do the service, the same thing. It's like, oh, while we're out in the field, I could just add that to that job, and when the invoice gets generated, it'll automatically populate that on that invoice. So it takes a lot of the, I got to remember, I got to write things down. It's like, no, we just pull out our phone and, oh, all right, Miss Jones, you got your application today plus this, and that. Okay, yeah, great. Here, it's going to be, instead of it being $110, it looks like it's going to come out to $256. Does that sound good to you? Okay, great. We're just going to charge the card on file. Does that sound great to you? Okay, cool. Yeah, make it super easy to pay. They don't even think about it half the time. I just like, would you like to use the card on file that you have, or do you want to set up a different payment? No, oh, no, use that card. I don't want to mess anything up. And then if we get a neighbor, like if you said like the one time, a neighbor comes out, which happens a lot. They're like, man, why is my lawn not look as green as that? I'm like, well, we've been treating this one for a year and 2 years, and it looks amazing, right? Come on, jump on board. We just get your data, and here's your estimate. How does that sound? Do you like the way that's, does that work for you? Give me about, it's going to take me almost a season to get your lawn, because you're really messed up. Like, you got a lot of bare spots and weeds and everything. I got to manage expectations here, but I'm like, hey, by next 4th of July, you're going to be, you're going to look at your neighbors and not go, man, what the hell am I doing in my life? You're going to be like, yeah, I fit in. Keeping up with the Joneses,
That's what we're selling most of the cases, in these residential zones. Well, I think that was a really good conversation with a lot of value. And I want to transition to something which is still on topic, but Maggie, any closing thoughts on that from you in terms of a contract and everything else? We definitely probably made some people think about what they're doing and how to change it.
Yeah, I feel like it's a topic that I could spend a whole episode on, just because I'm really passionate about it. I've seen renewals from both the commercial and residential side, and the good, the bad, the ugly. And so I think that we should definitely look into going further in that in the future. But John, appreciate your input on it.
Yeah, I'd love to have a conversation just focused on that too, because it's part of the growing pains. Like I said, going from where I was before to having a failing business to not knowing really what I was doing, and going backwards to, going down the path that I have. I was a college instructor going into construction, which somehow got off the shovel doing estimates for $1 million projects, then going back into lawn care. And then the most amazing thing happened. Like I said, I started helping people on Facebook groups and YouTubers all over the world. And it's crazy. I started to find that calling, where I'm helping other people. I enjoy helping people. I actually enjoy that a little bit more than the business itself. But I've got all the experience, so I've culminated all of those things together and started realizing, like, hey, I think this might be the direction I should have been going in the whole time. Of course, I had to go through all those trials and tribulations in the past to, get the knowledge and go through the fear, go through the frustrations, go through all the trials and tribulations that I had to do. Because now, like I said, I empathize with anybody that comes to me. And the main reason why I do the podcast, the reason that I coach people, and specifically coaching businesses, is because I want to walk them through and not be fearful. I want them to be successful, and I want to help them accelerate. Because for me, it took, I was still in the industry, but I was really there was a 10-year gap where I was licking my wounds, and I kind of didn't keep that goal in the forefront. But you know what I mean? I really had to, it took me a lot longer, and I realized that it doesn't have to be the case for everybody. They don't have to wait like that. They could, you're going to fall down. And I don't want you to be down on the ground for a really long time. I want you to get yourself up, dust yourself off, and get back up on the horse. Because otherwise, you might go through your life and regret that you didn't take the chances that you should have. Because you never know when it might just be that one, you fell off one more time, just getting back up on that horse or getting back up on the bike. That last time, that's when you actually started riding the horse. That's when you learned how to ride the bike without bailing every time you make a turn. And it's now you're getting progress, because that's the thing. It's if you just have to keep pushing through no matter what. And that used to be one of my taglines when I was doing these Facebook Lives. I used to do Whiteboard Wednesday. That was my catch. And I'd show people how to budget things, and I'd show them how to, grow their business and all these other things before I ever had any titles or anything, before I became a certified financial coach and all these other things. It's just, it was just no matter what happens to you, keep pushing through, because you never know. You are probably success is right in front of you, and you just might not see it because you might be in a fog, right? And it's just get through it, keep pushing through. You might get right out that fog and go, you're so lost, and you're so you're afraid, and you're lost, and you don't know where to go. And it's no, just keep going. And then all of a sudden it opens up the light, you start seeing light, and then all of a sudden all the clouds disappear. And now you have a very clear vision. And you're like, oh man, it's so much nicer to be here to where I could see things, and I could actually, oh, there's my goal. It's right there. That's where I want to be. Oh, I'm not that far from it. Let's go.
You're right. I think all of us three on here, and probably everybody listening, has had a moment like that where they felt like they were lost, but they just kept going, kept pushing, kept making progress. And then all of a sudden you realize oh, there it is. There's that clarity, that moment of clarity that we've been looking for. And when you can find people who have already achieved the goals that you want to achieve, and you can go talk to them and ask them questions, and not try to look cool or look important or sound like you know what you're talking about, but just be vulnerable and curious about where and how they did what they did. That is how to compress decades, literally decades, into days and sometimes hours of a conversation, to open up that fog and help get more clarity into where ultimately we're going.
And I feel like I'm the guy. Now you could do that journey yourself, and it's hard, it's scary, whatever. I like to think that I'm the type of person that I'm in the clear spot, and I come back into the fog, and I reach out, and I'm trying to help. I'm like, listen, come to my voice. I'm going to help you get to a safer place, or we're going to go through this together. Not to say that in my future, everything's absolutely clear. I have storms ahead and I reach out to other people. I have mentors myself, but I like the fact that I could go back. I'm very grateful for where I'm at, and I want to always reach back and help those that are either behind me or alongside me, and just like join arms and say, let's go, let's do this together. It's going to make it easier.
So, man, I mean, that has been my kind of like motivation for bringing together this community that I've been building for I've been building it for decades, but really just the last 6 months, we've been creating a structure to it. And it's exactly that. It's an opportunity to give back, because we all want that opportunity. And I've found a lot of joy and gratitude in that. And I want to ask you, John, if someone's listening and they're like, hey, I think I could really benefit from a conversation with John and maybe going to one of his boot camps or something, how can people get a hold of you? And what are some of the things that you do in terms of coaching and some of these things that you have mentioned throughout the podcast today?
JohnPajak.com. That's JohnPajak.com. You could see some of the coaching workshops that I offer. I would highly suggest, before you do that, check me out a little bit. You go check out the Profits with Paycheck podcast. That is a really good way to understand like who I am, how I operate. Sometimes I am a little bit dry when I get in front of other people. Then I open up because we have the ability to interact with other people. So if you listen to those episodes where I have a guest, you could see how I interact with other people. And I always try to treat people with love and respect, and make everybody feel comfortable. But when you listen to my solo ones, I'm trying to teach a lesson. It's not just me yammering on about whatever. It's like, I want to give you actionable steps. So if that gives you any insight as to how it might be working with me, it's like that, except on steroids. Like we get stuff done. And like I said, budgets, break-evens, and bottom lines is one of the workshops that a lot of people go through. I do offer monthly coaching that includes the BBB plus business development. And it's really hand in hand. And really, I find that even though it's incredibly important to know your numbers, we'll just do a generic quote unquote know your numbers. Having profitable service pricing, is very important. But on top of that, knowing how to market and sell that is invaluable, because there's a lot of people that I've helped get their companies turned around. They know where their weaknesses are, and then it's like, all right, I got to sell work, and then they're like, I don't know how to do that either. So I've been working on like a monthly basis. I generally work with people too to like not only get their numbers straightened out, but then to walk them through the process and how to grow their business. With marketing. I'm not a marketing. That's not like my super thing, but I just share what's worked for us, and it's grown a very nice company so that I could take care of my family, and it's achieved a lot of amazing things for us. So for those of you that are listening and not watching, I have a huge smile on my face, because the way we've built our business it's been good, and I want to share that with people.
It's so funny because the CEO or the captain's always driving the ship, but like marketing's making sure that the ship doesn't sink. Like marketing is so important, and there's not a single piece of our daily lives that marketing doesn't touch. And so I love that point, because from my experience, I'm working sales, and a company that's not performing well, good chances are they're missing on the marketing side. So, well, that being said, John, I wanted to ask you, we kind of end all of our episodes in a similar fashion, and we ask our guests to share a trades secret. So this is something that you've learned in your many years working in the trades. Is there a secret that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, we're not talking about the squirrel thing, right? The squirrel migration. We gotta leave. We can't talk. We don't have enough time to go down that rabbit hole. No. No. When it comes to it's hard to say like trade secret, okay? But there are some basic things that I found, and Maggie, you already mentioned one of them, and I'm going to get to it in a second. But, making sure that your business is truly a business, okay, not just a hobby, because a hobby could just sustain itself, and it doesn't really make you that much money. And I'm not trying to discourage anybody when it comes to this, but there's a lot of guys that look very, very successful, but I see underneath the hood, I'm like, man, you have all these things, but the business really isn't making you money. It's just it's sustaining itself. You're kind of grabbing the scraps, and that's not a good way to go about business. I find a lot of the mistakes that guys are making are individuals, guys and gals. I've dealt with quite a few women that are in that position too, where they think that their profits are their paycheck. And that's not true. You have to pay yourself something. You have to pay yourself at least what you would pay a technician. Second of all, like Maggie, you mentioned the marketing. Almost when a lot of smaller companies come to me, the big glaring thing I see is that they don't put any money towards marketing. And they're like, well, I did this. I put, Google ads out and I spent this much on this and it just didn't work out. It's like, well, why? Let's look at that. Let's peel the onion back a little bit. What did you do exactly? You told me you spent money on ads, digital and print. Okay. Well, how far did you go? Well, I just spent like this, and we spent like $500 and nothing came back. So I said, it doesn't work. Like, well, you got to be consistent.
Not to mention the brand, like money spent on marketing without a strong brand is money wasted.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, because you could be, a J&J lawn care or something, right? And no branding, nothing on your trucks, no uniforms, no logo, maybe, even my original company, Johnny Boy Lawn Care, back in like 2000, I had a little logo that was, it was just like something that I had a stamp, and I would stamp it on everything. I couldn't afford to actually have all my invoices made with my logo on it.
You just would stamp it. That's all. I
would stamp it.
Great. That's super creative.
And like, because back then it was all paper stuff. Like, we had like the triple carbon forms. But anyway, not to go down memory lane, but your marketing, if you look at it, marketing just isn't ads. It's way deeper than that. And if this sounds familiar to you, if you've gone out and you have spent money on anything like digital ads, whatever, print ads, and you gave up, you're like, it doesn't work. We just get referrals from people and we have word of mouth, and that seems to be working well for us. I don't want to spend any money on that. It's like, man, that you're delaying your pain. You are basically sitting you're basically on Pain Island, and you have the ability to go, but it's like, you just don't want to put, the foot on the gas to get out of there. It's like, I'm just going to sit here and be in misery. It'll be fine. I'll get there eventually. It's like, no. Let's put our foot down on the gas and let's move out of here to a nicer place. I tell people like the tactics we use to get more clients, and they're just like, wait, you send out how many postcards? And it's like, yeah, but we're not sending them out to the whole world. We're just sending them out to like specific neighborhoods. And then on top of that, we're spending money on digital ads that target those people that are in those neighborhoods. So like and then we have a truck rolling around in that neighborhood that's got a brand on it. And then my guys will walk around hanging door hangers, wearing our uniforms, and our brand is all over everything. So like, it just psychologically, it's like they see anything, they look out their window and they see one of our flags, and our treatment flags are in the lawn, and they have our brand on it. It's all strategic, and it's like, we're everywhere. So like, anytime they start thinking like, maybe I got to get my lawn done, well, who's that big orange guy? Yeah, let's go with him. I see him everywhere.
And owners are so protective of their brand. And I'm saying, talking to two owners when I'm saying this, they're so protective of their brand. And one thing I noticed is like, sometimes it's okay to rebrand too. If like your brand's not working, you got to be humble and be like, okay, this had a nice run. Maybe I should get some outside consulting help and see what a rebrand might do for my business. And that's okay. Like it is okay to, I'm telling all the owners out there, it is okay to break up with your brand.
That is a tough one because, you know, we look at it and I agree with you. Sometimes it is absolutely necessary. Just to hit on that point, about 2 years ago, I walked through somebody and they had a very generic name. Now, not saying that the name has to be perfect, but it was too much like everybody else's name in his area. It was like he was always getting calls. He told me this flat out. He said, I'm getting calls for complaints from people that aren't my clients. They're complaining about my competition. And I got 2 companies that I'm getting cross-called for. And I said, listen, I think you probably should rebrand. I'm like, and he's like, no, man, I've had this for, 4 or 5 years and it's my baby. And I'm like, I know, man, but let's brainstorm. He ended up hiring somebody, that was not me. I don't do branding. I don't do that. But he found a professional and they did this rebrand. And once he did that, everything got so much simpler for him. Because then he started using all the tactics that I was helping him with. And he's like, dude, this is so much easier. Like, I'm getting so many calls. I think what was happening was people would see my stuff and they would confuse me with the crappy competition I had. So that he was like, I was like a brand new company through and through. My old clients adapted to it easily. We just said, hey, same people, same everything, just a new look. And new name, new look. That's, like new year, new me thing.
Exactly. Well, I think hey guys, I think if you're listening to this and you're thinking about maybe there's a time to make a change, let this be the wake up call you've needed to make a change. And I did this when I took over as second gen and my brother, my sister, my cousin, and I kind of got together and we built out a new logo and a new branding scheme and a new everything with we use the same words and everything, but a new logo. And it created so much hype in the local market because everyone was like, who's this new company? Oh, they're not a new company. They have been around for a long time. They've got a good reputation. Now we just know about them. So it's a good opportunity to rebrand, whether you change your name or you change your logo. Begin the year as a time. So, well, John, I think we're going to wrap. I have so many takeaways. I have notes from marketing to profitability to your story and helping others. I mean, you've shared so much with us today. Thank you. Thank you for being open and thank you for sharing.
No problem, man. It's a joy for me. So I appreciate you having me on the show. Maggie, it was wonderful to meet you. And I look forward to having future conversations if that'd be something of interest to you.
Absolutely. Well, we will have to trade back on podcasts for round 2 at some point this spring.
Sounds great.